Well, I mean, a lot. So we launched the new website the end of June 28th, which I think went over quite well. We basically re-engineered the website. The original one was built on WordPress, and it was kind of this Franken site that was sort of a combination of a crowdfunding plugin platform that wasn't very robust, WordPress, and it just had all sorts of issues. And it couldn't scale very well. So we built a new site that's a completely custom site that's built to be the site for the game, like when it launches, and can support millions of people and have a proper sort of basket system and be able to buy and sell and trade and do all the rest of the stuff with your items that was a big nightmare before, and have a lot better way of content. And we're going to be rolling out a lot more community features for it. So the current website maybe has 30% of the final functionality. There's going to be some really cool features. We're actually going to we're going to do a whole new custom forum system and comment system that we're building from scratch, because the sort of plug-in, the vBulletin or the vanilla one, which we're using now, just don't do it for the level of interaction and community we want integrated with the game. And there'll be a really cool Galactopedia, but at least we got the foundation out there now, and the whole server system scales, and it's much easier for us to manage things on a customer service basis. So that's really good. We unveiled some more ships. So we showed off what the Idris Corvette looks like, which I think people liked, and a few of the other things like what the Caterpillar looks like. We did a sort of 300i brochure, which was sort of more in depth of the 300i ship, and also had sort of in-fiction commercial for it that was really well received. So it was basically done as a commercial, like you would imagine Origin Jump works in the far future. It would like a BMW style commercial. And so all that sort of happened, which is great. And then, in the meantime, the team's been really busy on the hangar module, which is sort of what I was just sort of running around. This is a sort of rough. There's a bunch of things broken in the build, but the idea is you will, we're going to launch it at Gamescom August 24th. We're going to have a party on that Saturday, and then after that, let people download it. And it's our very first test bed of getting the client, the engine, the simple part of it out, getting it installed on people's machines, and working through, whatever issues would be, like compatibility issues, all the rest of the stuff. And that will allow players to, in their hangar, they'll see the ships they've pledged. The very first rev of the hangar module will only have the initial pledge ships, so that would be the Aurora, 300i, Hornet, Freelancer, Constellation. But after that, our plan is to continually sort of all these modules release. The hangar module, we're going to do a dogfighting module at the end of December. Then the following year, we'll have a planet side module, and then we'll have a single player alpha, and then the sort of alpha beta of the persistent universe. All these modules that we do, once we release one version, they're not static. We will rev them every couple of months with a new drop, and be adding features, adding content. So the whole idea is iterative development with the community. So they're sharing in it, they're getting to participate in it. So I hope they all understand that at the early stages, this, when we do the hangar and we do the dogfighting, it won't be as polished as a beta is on an MMO that they've worked on for 3 or 4 years, because this is a much earlier process. But I think ultimately it will make a better game and a better experience for people at the end, because by knocking out the problems early, I think it will be much smoother in the end. But at the beginning, I'm sure there's going to be lots of teething problems. There'll be just install issues. We've got performance issues right now because we haven't really concentrated on doing all the different level of details of the different ships. So if you don't have a fast machine, it may run slower. It'll definitely run slower than it will on the final build. But we've been hard at work on the hangar module for launch later on in August. And then we're also in parallel working on various things for the dogfighting, which happens at the end of this year. And so those are our two big main focuses. The art crew is cranking on all the ships, which are pretty involved. A simple ship like a fighter, something like an Aurora, is after the concept part's done, it's 2 to 3 months. So the concept part, we design it out and we model it in 3D, and that itself can take you 6 weeks to 8 weeks. And then after that, when we bring it into, we want to bring it into the engine, we've got to clean up the model, we've got to texture it, we've got to break it apart into sub-objects, rig it, animate it, and bring it into the engine. So that can take anywhere, like from very beginning to the very end. I think probably the shortest we could do is probably something like 3 months, and much more like 6 months or so on the bigger projects on one ship. Yeah. So there's a lot. So there's a lot of.
How many people are normally involved per ship?
Well, on the ships that we do, like when we're sort of in the engine mode, there's like 6 or 7 people working on it, on different parts and components of it. So right now, probably the most resources we have on the project are our resources. So internally, we have 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we have about 9 artists internally, and then there's about 20. Actually, if I include the ones in behavior, there's probably about 24 artists outside of our 9. So there's probably the biggest amount of staff on the project right now is an art team. So there's probably about 30 people or so that are just working on art. A lot of them are focusing on the ships. Some are focusing on the environments, like the actual hangar, the walls, the sections, and some are on characters. So we'll be showing some more character stuff, but if you looked at the 300i commercial, you saw the spacesuit that the guy was wearing. That was like one of the first outfits that we worked on. But yeah, it's all, I mean, basically there's a lot of asset production work because it's all the models are much more dense and complicated than, say, they would have been if you were making it for a 360 or a PS3 style game. Well, no. So, you'll see a little bit of it in the hangar because you'll be able to walk around in the hangar in first person or third person. When the planet side module will be sort of just expanding that out, where you'll be outside going to the space bar or going to the ship dealer, and it'll basically be the first sort of public prototype of what it will play like or feel like down on the planet between your space missions. But that side of things is actually, of all the things we're doing, that's not that difficult because we're working in CryEngine. It's got a very strong first-person engine. So actually, we don't do combat on the planet, but we do combat like shipboarding action. That's not a huge engineering task because most of the functionality is already there. So we have to do some extra stuff to deal with zero-G and some other effects we want to have, and we have to do stuff to interface with the server and deal with the persistent universe. So that's actually probably the biggest engineering challenge is the persistent universe, the server, how you load balance that, how you deal with the instances. But the actual mechanics of walking around in first person, the objects, that's really more a asset creation task because we have, I think we promised 100 systems. I think right now our map has about 115 systems. Each system can have multiple locations, planets, and each planet, some of the planets can have multiple landing locations. So something like Earth has 3 landing locations presently. Hang on, let me just turn my stupid thing off. So that's an asset creation. So we're doing a combination. Some locations will have unique designs, assets, and some will be sort of a more modular system. So like, Colony A, will be made up of bits that you have on sort of that level of planet. So the planet side stuff is more about like the overall design, figuring out what the content is, figuring out an efficient way that we can build assets to populate it all and still make it interesting. So I would say that's more a sort of design and content challenge than a technical challenge. Technically, the biggest challenge I would say is the sort of back end server stuff, some level of performance optimization, and then just making sure all the complicated ship systems that we're thinking about for dogfighting work well. Star Citizen, as it comes out, the first rev or whatever, it's not going to have a seamless, like you fly from atmosphere down onto a planet and we generate a whole procedural planet, because with the amount of star systems and planets we have, it's just unless you're doing some generic random looking planet, which I'm not a big fan of, that's like a content issue, just creating that many assets. So what's going to happen is we're not going to have any loading screens, but you'll be in orbit around a planet, and then you'll negotiate your landing at which location you want to land at, and they'll give you clearance to land. When you've negotiated it, you'll sort of basically hit autopilot, the same as you would do, say, in a wing commander or a privateer, and it would initiate the landing sequence, which will be in engine. So you'll sort of see, you'll be like your point of view, and but we'll sort of take control. You won't be able to fly it down, and you'll be point of view going through the clouds. Externally, you'll see your ship going through clouds, and then the clouds will break, and you'll see the area you're landing, and you'll land, and you land on the pad, and then controls back to you, and you can step out and go visit the bar or the shop or whatever. Yeah. No, we have a very complicated. So we have maybe I shouldn't say complicated. I should say ambitious sort of faction setup. So there are they're game defined ones, like standard things like the Merchants Guild or the Mercenaries Guild or the UEE or the Jean, which are sort of the various factions or races that you can be members of or work for or be aligned with or be in opposition against. But we're also allowing the players themselves to generate their own factions at all levels. So you can have a small group or a bigger group, a guild. You can be members of most of them. So we'll have both player created factions and game created factions, and then your reputation between will get monitored. And if you're a wanted outlaw in UE space, you're probably not going to get landing permission to land on Earth. And so we'll generate that, and that'll also affect who you fight, who you run into when you're in space, you're flying around, because the persistent universe is always looking and seeing where the different players are and matching them up based on, okay, well, you're a pirate and you're a merchant and you're going to cross paths. Well, then I'll put you into an instance and you can resolve that conflict.
Can you tell me more about the types of encounters players would come across in space?
Well, I mean, there's two levels, right? So there's going to be the PvE stuff, which is the NPC stuff, and I think about a week ago, we released a sort of how our dynamic economy is going to work. We did it on our website, and the key with it is that it's not just the economy. It's basically a system that generates missions as well as people buying and selling. So it's sort of like the idea is a closed loop system where planets generate resources. You've got to refine them. You've got to get them to other places where they manufacture them into ships or missiles or food or whatever it would be. And doing that generates missions for people to trade. It also creates opportunity for pirates to prey on it. If pirates prey on a trading run, then that will also generate missions from the factory that didn't get the goods it was expecting. So the Mercenaries Guild saying, here, can you go and play escort on the trading run because I'm not getting my goods. So the actual economy itself does a lot of the mission generating. So the idea is, if you're flying around in the universe, irrelevant of whether you've said I want to be more PvP or more PvE, you will see an active universe. You will see people going about their days, goods going from one planet to another planet, pirates preying on them, mercenaries defending them, law enforcement going after the bad guys. And if you're like someone that just wants to be sort of PvE and more along those lines, you'll still see this active universe. It's just that a lot of the ships you'll see will be NPC ships, or at least the ones that would be hostile to you. Maybe the ones that wouldn't be hostile to you would be like a player. And then if you're more PvP, it's going to matchmake you up with people, against real players versus NPCs. So basically what happens is, in our system, we simulate the whole world like sort of an AI ecosystem, say, and these are, these aren't the actual proper numbers, but just to give you an example, say there was 20 million AI agents running around in this universe, and at any one time, we're only ever going to get 2 million real players. So basically all that happens is when a real player logs on, he kicks off an AI out of the spot. So in the case where there will be 2 million real players playing, there will be 18 million AI agents simulating and 2 million players playing around in the universe. So the universe is always, no matter what, you can go on by yourself, no one else could be on, and it would still feel like it's alive. It's just been run by AI. So what happens is real players just basically kick an AI out of a slot. But in either way, it feels like an ongoing, evolving, active universe, which I think is the way we're trying to solve one of the big problems of a multiplayer game, which is, it's only fun when there's a big player base, right? If there isn't a big player base, then who do you fight against or whatever? And the way we work is, well, there's always someone. It just may be an AI. And the same happens for missions in the economy. Like, this factory says, I need 3 tons of steel alloy, and puts a mission out there. Well, if a player doesn't take the mission, then an AI agent will take the mission, and that will generate a merchant that goes from one planet to another planet. And so I think it will be different than what a lot of these other games have been. I don't know, we'll see, but I mean, it's my instinct that it will kind of sort of combine the best of like what worked well in a privateer or a freelancer, which was more a single player experience, and then what works well in sort of a full MMO where you've got the social experience where you're playing with your friends or even fighting against other people.
One of the questions from the community was about how you're handling the game as it ages, as it gets older. Specifically asking for PvE players, will there be any direct involvement from the development side in terms of mixing things up, like spawning a war between two factions or something like that? End game content.
Well, no, we're definitely so the whole design, which kind of why I was saying the economy system I described is sort of an emergent system, so it sort of reacts to what's happening and what the players are doing or who's blockading, whatever. So the goal of the game design is to have the players, by their own actions, generate a lot of what's happening in the universe and a lot of the conflict and interest and intrigue, and then we, as sort of the game masters, are adding and feeding new content in on a weekly basis. The same way on our website that we have like 8 to 10 posts a week, we'll be adding new content in. But the idea is, we can never add enough content to keep up with how gamers are. I mean, they'll just blow through everything faster than you can create. So the idea is the gamers themselves create 80-90% of the content that they're consuming, essentially, because it's all about their struggles for power or which factions with what other faction. And then we add in additional sort of stories, like a cool 5-mission series where you could get this one item, or we create a new sort of bad guy NPC, or we have a new star system that we add that someone can discover. And so we sort of add these things in to sort of keep things changing and evolving, and we're also looking at what the players are doing, and based on what the players are doing, we're sort of feeding that back into what we're doing. So we're saying, okay, well, this one faction is getting the upper hand in this area of the galaxy, so let's make some news stories about it in our newscasts. And then maybe let's send some, let's switch something up so this other faction can come over here and get involved in what's happening over there. So the idea is to make people feel like this universe is an ongoing, living, evolving universe and not something that's static. Like on a lot of the MMOs I've played, and it's hard for me to really get into a lot of them, is they sort of feel like you're in a time slice static world, and then occasionally there's an update, say once a year or something, and then they change the world. And I don't want the model of this should be more like very small iterative updates, which is also what we're doing on the development. That's why we're dropping things like the hangar module and the dogfighting and doing iterative development of them. So it's a different way of thinking about it, but that's kind of the goal.
Sounds like the Agile Scrum programming methodology.
Yeah, totally. Well, we use that. I mean, so and actually one of the reasons why we're doing the public-facing deliverables is the one problem that anyone that tells you about Agile Scrum is that people you kind of abuse it when it's an internal thing. Whereas yes, it's always meant to be on you're going towards a goal and it's a demo you're going to have to do. But when you're doing a demo for 200,000 people, you can't fake it, right? So it actually forces you to actually have it work properly and not be kind of jury-rigged in the background. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why we're doing it, because I sort of feel like it's going to force us to get our homework done sooner, let me say it that way. Because what happens normally in development is that you tend to finish everything to 80% of the way, and you're like, all right, that's easy to do, to fix up the last one, but you're off to the next task because you're so busy. And then what happens at the end, this is why projects slip quite a bit, is at the end of it, you have a lot of things that you have to clean up, and not any one of them is particularly difficult or time consuming, but there's so much of it that you don't have enough time to get it all done, and that's why everyone crunches at the end of projects. And I'm not saying that our method is inherently going to make us be brilliant and everyone else dumb, but I do think what it's forcing us to do is, instead of having one big crazy crunch at the end, it's sort of smaller sprints where there's little crunches for it, but you're in better shape as you get towards the end. So it's like, I don't know, it's hard to give a good analogy of it, but it would be you got to run 26 miles, but you decide that you're not going to run flat out for the last 2 miles. You decide that every mile you're going to run 100 meters at the end of the mile fast, and then you'll slow down again and do it again. I mean, we're basically implementing the system that I've talked about. We've got most of it up and running. So the way the ships work is all the functions in a ship are they're tied to an actual object, an item. So a targeting computer is an actual item that gets attached into your ship. An engine is an actual item. The thrusters, each one of the thrusters is an actual item. The life support's an item. Each one of the guns would be an item. So the power plant that powers your main thruster engine or the thrusters, that's an item. And they all connect to each other. They have pipes, and we can define the pipes, but standard ones would be a power pipe, a data pipe, a heat pipe. So like a lot of like in a computer, right? You power it. Requires power, but then it generates heat, and you have to dissipate the heat. So in a game, and for instance for us, our version of stealth is you just don't really have you don't have a big radar or electromagnetic signature, and so you don't want to be generating a lot of heat because that's going to create a bigger signature for the radar. So a really fully stealthy ship was basically like a super cool computer. And so you would need like a cooling, your various like coolers attached to your engines and guns to dissipate the heat. But of course, they'll take some slots away from something else, which could be a shield unit or whatever. So they're basically all these different parts in a work with each other. And you should almost think of the ship itself being almost like a case in the PC world, and you decide what brains you're putting in it, what GPU you're putting in it, what CPU all those things are basically what you can customize, and that's one of the reasons why I think that the game's going to be pretty interesting, because you could have the same players with the same ship, and they could have basically kitted out their ship with totally different builds. And there's definitely going to be a rock, paper, scissors to it, right? So one kind of build will probably trump another build, but then you could trump that build with a different kind of build. So part of, I think, combat, when you're going up against people, will kind of knowing how they set up, they set up their ship more for stealth, and if so, you need to change out your package for that. Because like if you have a really stealthy ship, it's hard to get radar locks for your weapons and all the rest of the stuff. So maybe you need to have more scanners. But more scanners will mean that you can't have as many other and weapon or as much power. So we basically implemented that system. The balancing of it's going to be a challenge, but it's really cool. And the other thing that's really cool is each one of those systems has a physical component that gets put in the ship. So like if you're shooting a ship, for instance, it's like it would be on a real ship. It's not like we just roll a dice and which system gets hit. It's literally our bolt goes through. Like if we knock the shields down and we're going through the hull, we've knocked the armor down now. Where our projectile, whether it's a physical projectile or an energy bolt, we trace that through the actual ship. And does it hit that? Does it hit the life support? Does it hit the power plant? Does it hit this? And if it does, it will do damage to it. And if it does damage to it, because of the power system, how they connect, it will affect all the systems in it. So it's all very emergent behavior. It's like it's basically much more simulated than it traditionally. Because in a game, most of this stuff is just like, okay, you've gone through the armor, and now you've got a 20% chance that you're going to hit the power plant, and a 30% chance you'll hit this, and you've done a critical hit. Well, that's not the way this works. This is like literally if you're shooting in the right place, where you know where the power plant is or where the life support will be, then and you get through the armor, you'll hit it and you'll do damage to it, and if you do damage to it and it goes down, then it goes. The game is skill based, right? So you're not just clicking on it and shooting at it. So it's really down to you as a player knowing when you're shooting a ship. What I expect is the better players will start to sort of learn like in which ship where the components are, and they'll sort of know what areas to target once they've knocked down the shields and arms. So I would say it's mostly skill based, in terms of you just being able to target. I mean, there's various ways you can target. One is obviously just flying, old-fashioned World War II style, move your nose around, target. But on a lot of the ships, they also have what we call Class 2 or Class 4 turrets. But the Class 2 turret is generally like one on the Apache, where like if you had the Rift on, you're looking around, and where you're looking is controlling where that gun is targeting. So we'll definitely all those kind of parts will be in there. So I just think there'll be a lot of fidelity and finesse in that part of the combat, and make it much deeper than say any other space game has been for this kind of thing. That's actually a good suggestion. I don't think we were thinking about underclocking, but I don't think there would be any reason why you shouldn't underclock it to reduce your heat signature. I mean, basically the process that we do is all the items get created, and it's just like a chip where basically they'll have a potential that can go over what their the default is, and when we create the item, we roll a number. Maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 30%, and then you, as someone that takes that item, if you go beyond the recommended setting, you're just risking destroying the item. But sometimes maybe you have to destroy a couple of items, and you now get that rare item that can go plus 30%. That thing may generate more heat, but you may have a build that you've set up where you'll just do a little more damage for each one of your ships. But I definitely would see there will be sort of a market inside the game where someone actually goes and collects these things, overclocks them, and builds, and then sells them for say twice as much as the base ship would cost. But then you've got that little bit of edge.
The cyber power equivalent.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Yeah, with whoever the best overclock, Digital Storm or whoever it would be, Origin PC, they can get that extra. They'll definitely. I think there'll be boutique ship people out there.
Actually, there's a question in terms of players selling items. Are you handling that through some kind of auction house system?
Well, we're going to let people. Yeah, we're going to basically sort of have a Craigslist sort of set up inside the game, so people will be able to sell for game currency inside the game. There probably will be a sales tax that will be on that, just in general, because everything that we've got has, when you land, there's a certain amount of it's like transferring title to something, right? If you sell someone a car, you got to pay a title fee, but it'll all be in-game currency. I think. I mean, so it's not. There'll be a small amount of that, but it won't be. Don't think of this like an RPG where the mechanic is you kill a bunch of orcs and they drop loot, and then you take the loot back and you sell it for whatever and then upgrade an armor and stuff. So it's not so much there won't be as much loot drop. So normally if there's a combat and you blow a ship up, most of the stuff, the parts of it won't be salvageable. Man, if you take over, capture the ship, then yeah, you could basically strip off the parts to sell the parts. So most of the time, if you were going after a ship and shooting it, it's more about getting it to give you its cargo, because the cargo would spill out and you could tractor that in. So the thing is, because there's a bit of controversy because people look at the video and go, "Oh, that's not right." But the actual physical simulation of the ship and how the thrusters are simulated is 100% correct. It generates an impulse of thrust to start it turning and an impulse of thrust to stop it turning. There's no resistance in space. But the visual representation that's, say, in that video is really a representation of what the velocity, what the angular velocity is, and not where the impulse is from the thrust, only because in space it doesn't actually require much impulse to start you rotating. So if you actually visually showed what was really happening, basically you would see the thruster go boop, and then it would go back to neutral and boop, and fire that way. I had it doing it the correct way originally, and it just looked buggy, so I changed it so you could just sort of see the thruster fire, because it's kind of cool to see the thruster articulate and fire. But the actual physical simulation underneath it is 100% correct. I haven't had time. It's one of the programming things that I'd like to go and play with, because there's been some discussion on the forums. That's not correct, and I've tried to explain to them that it's actually simulated correctly. It's just the visuals are not matching up to what's actually happening in the simulation, just because of the visual glitch aspect of it. But I think probably I will change it so you'll see it fire, and then as it's you start to slow down, you'll see it articulate and fire in the opposite direction to slow you, which still won't be 100% correct, because you actually are only firing a small burst each way, and we'll obviously keep it longer. But I'll do it, I think, because that will address some of the complaints people have, and I think it will make it a bit clearer. So that will be maybe a better blend between the visual realism and what I call sort of the sci-fi cool side of it, right? Which is, we have that constant struggle. It's there's no sound in space, but you've seen Star Wars. You like to hear choo choo, and and also generally, if you think about futuristic dogfighting, odds are it's not going to be humans piloting it. It would be computers, because they can, the ship itself could take a huge lot more forces, like when it's maneuvering. Speeds would probably be much greater than we currently allow you to do, because we sort of keep it sort of in the Star Wars realm, where it's essentially World War II dogfighting in space. But that's kind of fun. I mean, it's like, even in today's world, dogfighting isn't what it used to be 40 years ago. I mean, most of it's beyond visual range. If you're in a modern day jet fighter, most of the modern jets, and especially the US ones, are all set. They're all really for beyond visual range engagement, which is, in the real world, kind of nice and safe. Well, it's not safe, but it's less dirty than getting up close, and it's definitely safer if you're the America that has the best technology against someone else. But in a game sense, it's not nearly as much fun as getting on someone's tail and seeing them and that tight turning fight. So we always have to go there's a boundary between realism and coolness and fun. Well, not really. I mean, I think that you will not be able to reload your sort of externally mounted missiles unless you've landed and rearmed and refueled. It should be like real life. I mean, part of one of the goals, another one of the nuances of the combat is, management of your ammo, right? So your energy guns don't run out of ammo. They generally are powered from your power plant. Power plants, are things like fission, fusion, antimatter. They don't run out of power. But your engines, your thrusters expel matter to push you forward. So you actually have to collect the matter to go forward. So like hydrogen would be like, one kind of matter you could be expelling. So basically, the power plant creates basically the helps fuel the energy transmission where you're pushing out this matter which will propel you forward. So you have to manage things like your fuel levels, which is basically the matter you're using for propulsion, but also ammo. So yes, we have energy weapons, but we also have traditional projectile weapons. So one would be obviously missiles, but other ones would be things like real uranium depleted rounds or something. And the idea is that shields are much better at absorbing an energy weapon like a laser, but then maybe not so good at absorbing a projectile weapon like a bullet from an armor-piercing Gatling gun or something. But of course, your projectile weapons will have limited amounts of ammo because you can't have an infinite amount, where the energy do. So I actually would see there will be strategy of players depending on which gun loadouts and which guns they switch depending on what situation. Like if you're on someone and you kind of want to do some damage and he's got full shields and you got some hard ammunition, then that may be where you would want to use your mass driver cannon instead of using your laser gun or something. The management of your ammo is important, which would include missiles. And so partly the game is about how you would resupply, where you would go, and that's one of the reasons why we talked about having an asteroid base as one of the features. That if pirates find an asteroid base and take it over, that would be a place they could keep missiles and ammo and fuel close to the trade lane. It would make it much more effective for them raiding than someone that doesn't. And we also have a Starfarer, which is another ship, which is a ship mostly for transporting fuel or gas around. So we'll definitely have there'll be some level of sort of supply. So I would see a bigger group of people, say maybe operating as a squadron or as a guild. There will be logistics for having sort of combat operations on a larger scale, just like you would in real life, which I think could be pretty cool. Yeah, well, we're working on the Hornet. So right now we're working, because the only Hornet we've shown is the military version you'll fly in Squadron 42. So we're working on the civilian and the variants, the different parts you can interchange and stuff. So our plan is to sort of reveal that before the hangar module and then roll into the hangar module. So we're busily working on that. I think hopefully people we're actually I thought the Hornet was cool, but now we're going back in and adding more detail and parts, so it's going to be cooler.
Any final thoughts for fans and backers?
Well, no, other than say thank you. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, we're getting to build, this game at a level that you normally would only get to do if you're doing it at a major publisher, but with complete sort of creative freedom, without having the marketing department, sitting over your shoulder going, oh, you need to broaden it out so we get the casual players in and do this, and this game sold well, so let's do that, and we need you in this quarter. So we can really just concentrate on making a great game, and we have no other goal other than that. And as a game maker, that's amazing. It's like the artist's dream, and that wouldn't happen without the support of the community. I mean, the community, really, we're excited by the game, and they're as excited by the game as much as we are, which is, we're basically building the game we want to play, and this is the game I think the community wants to play, and they're enabling it. And I think it's an amazing. I mean, it's something's happening that I think will I'm not saying it's changing everything, but it definitely adds a new element to the landscape of gaming, where gamers can have their voice heard and make certain things happen that maybe wouldn't have happened in a bigger corporate situation. I think there's that sort of the people empowerment that the internet sort of has opened up. I mean, you can see it on, I mean, this is on the game side, but you see it in like, whatever. I mean, whether the Arab Spring turned out well or badly, a lot of it was because of the direct connection to the people talking to each other and connecting that way. And I think that same mechanic is enabling things to happen like crowdfunding of games and other things. And I think it's really great. I mean, I think it's great because it lets the voice of the people, or in this case the gamers, be heard more. So that's fantastic, and I thank everyone that's really backed us, because it's a privilege and honor to do that, and I thank you all for letting us do this.